Hello, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar on conversations worth having. I'm Melissa Asher. I will be your moderator today. And before we get started, I want to share some information about the webinar and the platform we're using. All attendees are in listen-only mode to avoid interruptions to the session. You can still ask questions, though, and in fact, we're going to encourage you to ask questions. We want you to use the Q&A panel in your webinar dashboard. There will be a couple of points during the webinar where we will specifically direct you to that. But if you're also inspired and have questions along the way, please go ahead and feel free to type those in at any time. We do anticipate having some time at the end of the webinar to answer those questions as well. Today's presentation is also available as a handout in your webinar dashboard. And we'll forward a link to all of today's attendees once the recording is rendered and available. So let's get started here by introducing a little bit about this topic. We were inspired by the book Conversations Worth Having. That was written by Jackie Stavros and Sherry Torres with help from the work of David Cooperrider. Today we're going to share some really interesting content and very helpful ways that you can be more effective at work just by having better conversations. And to do that, leading this conversation today, we have Christelle Beckfold.
Hello, everyone.
And Michael Gravo.
Good morning, everybody. It's good to have you here.
Christelle and Michael are both master trainers here at CPS HR Consulting and certified in this particular content. So I'm going to let them take it away.
Thank you, Melissa. And ladies and gentlemen, I just really want to take this moment and just welcome each and every one of you here. I want to also tell you how much I appreciate your willingness to jump online and to be able to get engaged with this topic. This is a topic that I fell in love with very recently, about a year ago, right after Jackie completed this book, and it's just been an amazing shift for me. Now, to be able to do this, Christelle and I have been doing training for really, well, for me, really long time.
Pretty much a really long time. It just doesn't look like it.
That's great. That's great. And if you just think back, you know, just less than 10 years ago, if we were going to have a seminar with almost 300 people attending, you know, what would we have to have? We'd have to have this very large auditorium.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, you and I standing on the stage with a microphone and the PowerPoint, of course. Mm-hmm. But I want to invite all of our attendees to kind of see themselves in a seminar. So if they've got other things going on, to pause them for a moment. Yeah. To be in that space of either sitting in the row or sitting at a table, and to be very, very present to this conversation, because this conversation has the potential to start to shift relationships, workspace, business, the public area. I got to tell you, when I got connected to this information and this topic, I just really saw the vision of what could happen in our great state of California. And seeing that if people started to shift their conversation in a different way, we could actually start to really reconnect. So I'm just really excited. So a couple of comments or a couple of ideas that we look at when we're looking at the history of what's going on here. We have about 70% of the workforce is disengaged, you know? And also we have 75% of organization performance problems stem from poor employee relationships.
Yeah, as a communication major, I can bring it all down to probably poor communication.
One conversation at a time.
You know it.
I think you're going to hear that line just a few times today. Yeah. So, and the cost of poor communications have been cited as over $62 million per year in large companies and close to $500,000 in smaller companies. Imagine what that's doing in our public sector and our nonprofit sector.
As a result of poor conversations.
Poor conversations. I'll wait until they see what happens in some of those poor conversations.
Absolutely.
What could we do to shift them?
Yes. So, In our brief webinar this morning, we're going to cover a few different areas for you. Number one, we're going to identify some common communication challenges. And again, as a communication major, this is near and dear to my heart. But we'll talk about some of these, and I'm pretty sure some are coming to your mind already. So we'll have some opportunities for you guys to share either in our Q&A chat or even just in your mind, kind of think about those situations. So we'll identify some common communication challenges. We'll discover why these challenges really inhibit our ability to communicate and connect with others for more effective interactions and conversations to get the results we're looking for. And then explore really the nature of those conversations and how we can shift the outcomes and the impact that we have on a day-to-day basis.
And that's the space, is being able to realize the nature of the conversation, you know, because in the nature of the conversation, we can actually create something else if we're aware of it. If we're aware of it. Go ahead. What's this methodology invites us to do?
So the methodology we're going to highlight for you this morning will invite you to challenge your assumptions and preconceptions, both internal and external, right? Those we might have in our minds and also those that we may also express externally. We're going to give you an opportunity and talk about ways to fuel productive and meaningful engagement with your teams, with your family, with friends. So this is not only a work-related conversation, but really in life. We're going to manage some negative attitudes and defensive positions, and then give you an opportunity and find some ways to ask for, so invite feedback, and also provide effective feedback more easily so that, again, we get productive outcomes. This will inspire creativity, innovation, and purpose for your teams.
Hey, Christelle, the big thing about this is we've got to realize the type of conversations we've been in and what we've grown up in. And in fact, it's something that I like to call what's happening in our bag of culture. You know, so when we look in there, you know, for myself, I've got many, many years of having different types of conversations. This 1 hour, our desire here is really just to kind of make them aware of what's possible. And later down the road, we'll have some other sessions that will last a longer time frame. But this moment is a beginning. Not all of this is going to be covered and completed in 1 hour.
No, absolutely not.
So it's just about being able to see what's possible. And I want everybody to kind of get their possibility hats on to be able to see something new, look at it in a different direction. Go ahead.
Well, and it's interesting because that really brings up a thought that we're almost always engaged, either internally or in dialogue with others, some sort of external interaction. But how often are those conversations actually worth having?
Absolutely. So I want everybody to be able to think of a time that they were having a great day. I mean, great day. Being in the classroom all day, people were loving it, things were going great, got home, had a conversation.
Yikes.
Yeah, one of those conversations.
Okay.
Now, I personally like to be able to carry my own weather, but at the same time frame, sometimes those different conversations, or a conversation with a student, or a conversation with a coworker, next thing you know, it's like, wow, what happened to my sunshine?
Right.
You know? And also, I just want everybody to kind of think about that for a moment. You know, they're feeling good, things are going well, and then bam. How much did that conversation affect that moment?
That moment and many moments after.
We start to create stories on top of that. We actually start to be able to put it in. It's like, this person is broken. It's not me, it's them. You know, we want to protect their ego. You know, all those different things that come into play.
I am familiar with those internal conversations.
Well, how about, let's shift it to the other side. We're not feeling too great. We're feeling a little bit low. And just at the right time, a person comes along and shares something really, really powerful. Talks about how much they appreciate you, how much they are so thankful that you're there, and what you do and how you do it. You know, what does that do for a person? Just in, I mean, you're feeling down, maybe the person felt it, maybe the person didn't feel it, but lo and behold, it just happened to be there, you know? So what happens for you when there's a positive word shared in a low moment?
And even just hearing those words right now, I started to feel positive, kind of upbeat. I got a smile on my face. I actually, literally, I felt my heartbeat a little more, where I started to get engaged, just hearing those positive words. That conversation is powerful.
It does. It just shifts us. It moves the emotions. It does. In fact, now I want you to think of when a conversation didn't go too well with a colleague, maybe with a family member, with a team, or maybe during your last staff meeting. Okay, Christelle, let's do a quick little role play.
All right, so let's walk through this. Let's say, Michael, I am a supervisor, and I am preparing to have a difficult conversation with you, Michael, my team member. I know it doesn't happen very often, but so Michael, you're really good at your job.
Yes, I am.
Here's the thing: sometimes you arrive late and you miss some deadlines. So I'm going to start us off there.
Okay.
Having this difficult conversation. And those of you in the audience, think about this. Has this ever occurred? Or maybe you have a friend who's had this conversation. Wink, wink. So, hey, Michael, we got a problem. You're always late and you constantly miss deadlines. You're going to have to try harder.
Man, I'm trying. You know, I do a great job. I give this job, I give this position, I give everything I got. And sometimes I miss, a deadline here or there. But, a lot of times it's because of Joey. Joey just doesn't give me the correct information, and I have to rework things. And so I'm having to clean up things for my teammates. And in other words, I'm throwing Joey under the bus, and so I'm not always late. You can't use that always comment or the never comment.
Sure.
But, some days I hit traffic. I have to drop my kids off at school. And so what? I was here early yesterday.
Well, sure, you were yesterday, but look, we're all busy. We've got something we've got to do in the morning, but we all make it on time. And look, I understand we've all got assignments that need review and edits before we submit them. But again, we all manage to meet our deadlines with the correct information. Look, I need you to focus, get to work, and get your assignments done on time from now on. Or, look, I'm going to have to follow through with some consequences, Michael.
Yeah, whatever. Fine. I'll do my best.
Sound familiar? How many of you have had that kind of conversation, or thought of having that kind of conversation, or feared having that conversation? How do you feel after that, or even during? Do you ask yourself these questions and kind of end up in this kind of struggle? Why is this such an issue? Why doesn't this just fix itself, right? And how long is this going to go on? Truth is, in our relationships, both personal and professional, they're affected and shaped by our most recent conversations.
So what you're saying is all of our relationships are suspended kind of in space by the last conversation we had with them?
Yeah.
That's very familiar. That's very similar to the idea of fish being in water,
Yeah.
And so with that idea is how much more do our conversations shape our perceptions of those relationships? How much is it that our abilities to be in that moment, both internally in our heads and externally in the conversation with others? See, that's the piece that this information and this methodology has really helped me out more than anything else. It hasn't been so much the conversations I'm having with other people. It's the starting of the conversations of what's happening in my head, that has really created a free space for me to be able to work on my emotional maturity in those places.
Wow.
So conversations are all around us, and they're even when we're not aware of them.
Yeah.
We're building, we're detracting on relationships. If we're not mindful, I love that word, mindful of it, just as fish are not conscious of being in the water until we're out. Okay, so my question is, are you swimming in life-giving conversations, or is your pool not so clean?
Yikes. Wow. Okay. So that kind of changes things for me. And it's interesting, right? We think about conversations, and what we do, we try to focus on finding the right words, right? We tap into our brain. We try and figure out what experiences have we had in the past? How do I need to phrase this in order to get it to be the most effective, to get the recipient of our message to get it and take action? Here's the thing. When our conversations occur, it's not just a single part of our brain. Our entire brain engages. So we got the limbic brain, right? Part of our brain for recalling experiences and maybe emotional history, again, sort of what experiences have I had and what do I need to do to plan for those. Our primitive brain, our instinctive brain that controls our actions or our reactions engages. That's the part of the brain that resorts to that fight or flight mode, that protection, right? How do we protect ourselves from that difficult response or reaction we might get?
You know, and Christelle, just real quick, in the same area of protect, I've also understood that that part of our brain really only has the capability to feel and not really link language or words to what we're feeling.
Yes.
And that's that first part right on top of the brainstem that all things are received.
Yes, absolutely. That's the thing, is we feel first, and then we tap into a different part of our brain to try and grab language to articulate that. But here's the problem. When we're in protect mode, they don't link very well.
No.
We're focused on emotions. We have what we call amygdala hijack.
Well,
yeah, okay, emotional hijack, right? Dan Goleman, he's the father of emotional intelligence. He calls it amygdala hijack. That's the part of your brain that's just taken over by your emotions. But think about it, it's emotional hijack. When you get emotional about something, you're in a fight or flight mode. You want to protect. You want to shut down whatever argument's coming at you and just focus on what you're trying to do and protect yourself.
Or run.
Or run.
You know, you're going to cover this conversation up. You're just going to kill it. You're just going to kill the relationship along with it. And it's not even the complete message.
Absolutely. It's the story we're telling ourselves. So here's the thing. We get this emotional reaction. It's immediate. It's overwhelming. It's maybe out of measure with the actual conversation going on because it's triggered so much more, this like emotional threat. It's that fight or flight. And then here's the thing. Your neocortex also engages to formulate language. It's your basic thinking, it's your reasoning, it's your cognitive skills. But here's the thing with the neocortex as well. It's responsible for conscious thought and intellectual memory. And then our limbic system controls and conveys emotion and empathy. When those systems work in concert and respond, they allow us to connect. But you have to be conscious of this. Here's the thing. You have to step back and figure out, again, that mental shift. Am I being mindful? Is this the most effective way for me to enter this conversation or carry on this conversation? And really the question is, am I trying to protect or am I trying to create an outcome by connecting and being more effective?
Yeah. I think Dr. Covey says it another way, which I think is really, really powerful, is that a lot of times when we're listening just simply to respond.
Yeah.
And he encouraged us to listen to understand.
Absolutely.
And when we get to that place of, pausing and going into understanding, we're shifting from that protect mode into the connect mode.
Love it.
And that's what's so powerful. Yep. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to be able to get to our first question, and we'd like to have a quick Q&A, just a simple, in one word, in a word. Would you please tell me what kind of conversations are you or your team having? Just in one word.
Okay, so this is a part, where you find that Q&A panel. It's just like texting in, one-word answer. We're starting to get some interesting answers here. Informative, FMLA, conversation, goals, productive, workload.
Oh, yeah.
Hard, unproductive, encouraging.
Nice.
Got some positive.
Yeah.
Work, just work in general. Another FMLA. That is a different one.
Oh, yeah.
not meeting deadlines, supportive, a growth conversation.
Nice.
Nice.
Attendance. Tough, a vague conversation.
Yeah.
Have you ever had one of those?
Absolutely. Well, maybe. I'm not quite sure. What did it mean?
Conversations about budget. There are some fun conversations happening, some teaching conversations,
Nice.
some corrective conversations.
Oh, yeah.
On the other side, we do get a passive-aggressive conversation
Oh,
every once
yeah.
in a while.
What are you trying to say?
Repetitive. Yeah, repetitive. Again, sharing, productivity, workload training. So seeing some themes here. Wasteful. Sometimes the conversation feels wasteful. Sometimes it can feel deceptive.
Oh.
Sometimes it can be inspiring.
Yes.
So
Yes.
these are great, lots of great responses and lots of conversations happening.
Yes.
And you know what? All of them are all over the board. And so what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to provide you a little bit of a framework around different types of conversations. And again, the foundation of this conversations worth having is based on an idea of appreciative inquiry. So grounded in appreciative inquiry, or AI, not artificial intelligence, is grounded in the notion that we co-create every moment. And ultimately, our social systems, through conversations and shared meaning making, so our meaning making machinery, the stuff between our ears, widely used for fostering positive change at any level, within ourselves, within groups, within organizations. Language of life opens wide a universe of strengths that we can draw on, human, ecological, for searching nature's billions of years of wisdom and innovation. There are also strengths that cannot be touched or seen that is in the realm of spirit and unseen and miracles of life. So let's break all of that really huge piece down into a couple ideas. So first off, we would like to categorize all of our conversations as either appreciative or depreciative. And we're going to call that direction.
Okay.
Okay?
I like
We're going
it.
to call that direction. The other piece that we have in that area is statements and inquiry. We're going to call that tone.
All right.
So if you're making a statement,
Ooh, with
you
a
can come
finger
out
point.
with the finger point, that was the index finger point.
Yes.
All right. So basically, that can be a statement.
Sure.
However, if I sit back and go, well, Christelle, I don't quite understand why you did that. See, I'm going into inquiry. Okay. So basically, we're looking at tone.
Sure.
And I love that yesterday in one of our big meetings, someone talked about the idea that people today seem to be tone deaf. Isn't that powerful when you think about that? And not only are we tone deaf, I think sometimes we're unaware of the direction the conversation is going. So we want to be able to look at these two different continuums, if you will, appreciative, depreciative, as tone, and as direction, and then also statement and inquiry as tone. Here are the four groupings. And again, we're trying to take language that has billions of words and characters and slam it into potentially four categories. But I think these four categories work. So if you look at it, if it is a depreciative conversation and the statements is in your face, it can be very, very destructive.
Absolutely.
Has anyone ever had a destructive conversation before?
Yeah.
And walked away from that relationship?
Yeah.
Because in that space, sometimes we got to ask ourselves, is the cost of this conversation, is the pain of this conversation worth this relationship?
Yeah.
And sometimes that worth of the relationship, sometimes we walk away from it.
That's the bridge burning.
Yep, that's the bridge burning.
Intentional and mostly knowingly.
But also, I could turn that into a positive tone, which is appreciative. Yet it'd be more like a statement like, you know, Christelle, you're so awesome.
Thanks, Papa.
There's my Southern California. You're doing a great job. You know, and it's all about affirming one another, but it doesn't always move us forward. And I think that there's times and place for all of these, except for destructive. We really need to walk away from the destructive things. Okay. However, if it is depreciative and it's inquiry, it kind of sounds a little critical. Why didn't you take the trash out last night?
Sure.
Why didn't you do the dishes?
Sure.
Why didn't you fill out this report? Why didn't you do what I asked you to do the way I wanted you to do it?
You know, Michael, it's really interesting because we look at this graph, this chart here, and we think sometimes, look, I have to have critical conversations. That's true, right? We talk about appreciative inquiry, and we're looking at that, you know, the best sort of situation here with conversations worth having. But there are critical conversations. Again, appreciative inquiry is not about ignoring negative.
Exactly.
We've got to have these conversations. It's being mindful of the tone you're creating and the direction you're sending this conversation.
Right.
Critical conversations have to happen, but they need to be few and far between if we're trying to get the most effective outcomes possible.
Perfect. So good. So good. So basically, if I'm just going to go with myself, if I can feel the tone and become aware of my direction, and I want to talk about our internal negative unconscious bias.
Yeah, those perceptions.
That, like I like to call that our bag of culture. You know, things that mom and dad put there, other things that were put into place. I can find myself going critical or destructive on myself.
Yeah. We're our own worst critic.
Exactly. And so what I want to be able to do is start to ask myself, what do I really want?
Yeah.
Where do I want to be able to take this? And by being able to be aware of my tone and direction, I can move any conversation. This is what I believe now over the last 8 months of working with these two great authors, is that I have come to the realization that I can shift any conversation, but I have to first begin with me.
Yes. Yeah, and it's interesting. So the nature of conversations is predictive of whether we'll drop into protect or connect mode. And with this, we've got two simple practices. Now, simple, as in simplistic, not easy. Not easy by any stretch. But really, when we talk about these practices, there's two. So we'll start, the first is positive framing. So first step, positive framing. And Michael, this is exactly what you've been talking about, right? How do I get in my own mind? How do I stay conscious and mindful of the conversation I'm trying to have? So positive framing, it's that mental shift. It's the refocus of your attention, so that mindfulness in actions and in thoughts to get more of what you want. It's that aha moment.
Absolutely. I'm addicted to the aha.
I
think most trainers are addicted to the aha.
Yeah, that light bulb, right?
Right. It's that example, for example, of imagining you or your team are unproductive, disengaged, overworked, and underappreciated, and that we experience that we would prefer something different.
Yeah.
Well, what if we actually started with ourselves and started to paint the picture of what we want to create versus always allowing what is? Because here's the thing, every moment is a brand new moment. And if we can't fix the past.
No, absolutely not.
But in each moment we can create something positive, we can change it, we can shift it. And so positive frames draws people in, it inspires curiosity, imagination, and interest. Let's demonstrate what a positive frame could do.
All right.
What is a positive frame from your perspective then, Christelle?
So positive framing is really, again, that opportunity for us to take a moment, right? Pause, take a breath, reframe in your mind. Instead of, let's use the example, Michael's coming in late, he misses some deadlines. But here's the thing, I'm curious. Is there something we could do differently? Because, Michael, you are great. You have skills. You are amazing at what you do. I want to tap into more of that. Let's think together and sort of mentally, I want to get curious. It's that curious exploration, right? And why we have Curious George here is really thinking about and getting curious as to how we can create the outcomes we're looking for.
Right, and we're starting with that frame inside our own mind.
Absolutely.
You know, it's not so much verbalizing it with me right away, it's about what you're verbalizing inside.
Yes.
Okay, so we have these classes. Yes.
It's thinking about really, what do you want to see, or what do I want to see instead?
Mm-hmm.
So the positive frame, I'm telling myself, the story I'm telling myself is Michael is always late, he's always missing deadlines, but that's not true.
Correct.
There are times when Michael is on time.
Mm-hmm.
There are times when Michael turns in everything, not only on time, but early.
Yes.
And it's great.
Mm-hmm.
My mental shift, my positive framing is, what's going on in those situations? Can I keep in my mind the times that Michael is effective, and then start to get curious?
Yeah.
Hey, Michael, what's going on in those times where you get here early or on time? Or the times when you're so focused in your work that you are on fire.
Yes.
And turning in stuff that's way beyond what we even thought was possible.
Mm-hmm.
That positive shift gets us in this opportunity, in the ability to look at situations from the positive
Mm-hmm.
and the outcomes we're trying to create.
So the positive framing is what's happening inside of ourselves. If we're the supervisor, if we're the leader, if we're the individual, we're asking ourselves, okay, how can I create this conversation to be more of the powerful,
Yes.
more of the strength?
Yes.
So far in Jackie's work, appreciative inquiry,
Yeah.
emotional intelligence,
Absolutely.
strength-based focus.
Yes.
Okay? And if we start to get present to that internally, how do we bring it out loud?
Well, that brings us actually to our second step. And the second step of this, first one, positive framing. Second, asking generative questions.
Generative questions. That's weird. That just sounds weird.
Well, what you're trying to do is generate opportunities, generate possibilities. And so being outcome focused, we ask questions.
So you take that positive frame that you have in your head, and when you're presenting it to me, you know, the good employee that struggles a little bit,
Sure.
You're actually coming to me with questions. Hey, Michael, you know, when you do really good work, tell me a little bit about what's going on. What's the context that's in? What's that space you're in when things are just rocking? And I'm like, oh my God, you know, when I'm developing a new training program and you're telling me this is awesome and you're saying, wow, this is really good. And I'm thinking about making those shifts.
Yes.
And you say, oh, okay, that's giving you some tools to how do you create more of the context, but you're going to ask me questions. So things like generative questions change the way people think.
Yes.
Generative questions stimulate compelling images for people. Not only that, but when I looked at the word generative, it talked about life-giving.
Yes.
And now as a business coach, I do a lot with leveraging questions. And I have a firm belief that in the space of questions, possibilities are revealed.
Yes.
But in the space of answers, a lot of times those possibilities are concealed.
Yes.
And so what we want to be able to do is how do we create more and more new possibilities by using generative questions?
Yes.
So here's a couple of examples of some generative questions. How do you see it?
Nice.
Okay. What might be possible if we take both of our ideas and come up with another idea that actually incorporates both?
Yes.
What might we best work together with? You know, again, I want to bring in that whole idea of context, knowing and understanding context in this space. I want to learn from you. What puts you into a success space? Okay, and again, this methodology is not all on trying to be all
positive and Pollyanna, everything's wonderful.
Everything's wonderful, exactly. It is about utilizing these tools and creating what you want versus getting stuck in those destructive and critical conversations. And at times we need our critical conversations. I don't think we need destructive conversations. I don't see any life being brought out of constructive or destructive conversations.
Well, and also when we talk about generative questions, it really is about creating possibilities. It's not about having all the answers, right? As supervisors, we feel like we have to have all the answers. We don't.
Right.
And part of the beauty of this is asking questions that generate possibilities for both of us.
Right.
Right. That positive framing is also an opportunity for us to get out of our own way, feel like we have to have the answers for everything, solve everything, and invite other people into the conversation and say, how do you see it? Where could we go from here? How do we come together and both get what we need? Those generative questions are it.
You know, Jackie and Sherry talk about a story of when they were working with British Airways.
Yeah.
And in that space, what they were called in for as a consultant team is to be able to help the British Airways figure out why people were losing their luggage.
Yes.
You know, fortunately, I've been on a lot of trips and I seem to be getting my luggage more often than I used to. So I love that. But they were really starting to get into that space of you're doing this, blame this, blame that person, get in the blame game, and that just fortifies everybody into the protect mode.
Yes.
However, what Sherry and Jackie were able to do is produce a question that basically said, what do we really want for our customers? And that expanded the conversation from just being about baggage.
Who did it?
And who did it, to let's create a new vision for our customer experience. And by asking that generative question, that just opened up the doorway to be able to create a whole new type of situation for British Airways, which, by the way, I've flown on recently, and it's pretty darn good. I really enjoyed it. Now, bringing in all these different pieces together, kind of knitting it together, knit one, purl two, knit one, purl two.
I make scarves that way.
We have what we call, or what Jackie and Sherry call, create the flip.
Yes.
Okay, so it's a 3-step process. It's going to take some time. Remember, folks, this is simplistic, not easy. Okay? So first off, we want to be able to name what that problem is. Get present to what the problem or complaint is. Get present to the negative results and the impact of those. Just name it. And you know, I find that when I'm struggling with my emotions, if I can say to myself at least, wow, I'm feeling angry, or I'm feeling frustrated, by being able to name it, gives it the opportunity to float on by. Is what I find.
Absolutely.
So we want to be able to name exactly what's going on.
So I've got a sample of this. Again, with Name It, you're going to identify a problem that you're experiencing or maybe some sort of negative result. So I'm going to go back again using our kind of same experience here that we demonstrated earlier. Michael's coming in late. He misses some deadlines. But here's the thing, and that name it part, right? Again, it's the positive framing. It's that shift you're going to do here. So it's not about Michael coming in late. It's not really about him missing deadlines. That's a result. But here's the thing. By being late, he's not able to be actively engaged. He's not involved in conversations with our team. He's not able to contribute. That's what's really at heart here. So how do I go to the next step? How do I flip it, right? So take that conversation and put this, instead of coming at Michael with, hey, you're always late, you're missing deadlines, it's, hey, Michael, you do a really great job, and we need more of that. We need you to be able to engage with us, to connect, to be involved in our conversation.
Yeah, what can I do? What can I do?
So how do I reframe that for myself? I come to Michael and I say, hey, positive opposite of what I'm seeing or what I'm feeling. Michael's always late. Michael's always missing his assignment. What I want to see instead is that Michael is connected. Michael's engaged. He's sharing his skills. He's involved with the team. He's able to contribute. That's what I want to see. The flip is that positive opposite in your mind. Now you're looking at, how do I address with Michael the way that he can share his skills, the way that he can engage with the team, to interact. And then the third step of this flip is you frame that conversation. So the positive impact that I would get if Michael were here, if he was able to be involved with the team, to be engaged, to contribute, the team would better benefit from his skills, from his energy. They feel that everyone was treated fairly, that Michael's commitment to providing effective work products on time is seen. Your reputation would be positive. That's the impact this would have.
Yeah.
And how do we have that conversation?
Let's demonstrate it.
All right.
Okay, so give me the flip question, and let's see how we're able to kind of play with that.
So, Michael, I noticed that, there's some times you come in a little late, there's some times you miss deadlines, and that's important to address. What I'd really like to address, though, is the way that we can get more connection from you. You have amazing skills, and I want the team to be able to benefit from those more readily, more effectively.
Mm-hmm.
Can you think of anything that would provide you the ability, the opportunity to be able to engage more, to connect more, or share more with the team?
Yeah, well, I have these responsibilities on Tuesdays.
Okay.
Of being able to bring my child to school.
Yes.
And I know before I got hired on, we kind of had that conversation that I needed to be able to do that. And if we can do something different with the meeting, can we, I want to be able to be here.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you coming at me this direction, and you're absolutely right. I love working with this group. I have a passion about this team.
I can tell.
And so if we can shift the meeting, if I can get a little bit more head time, maybe an agenda for the meeting so that I can either text it in first thing in the morning. Those are just a couple ideas. What are you also thinking that we can be able to do to frame this into something different? Can we do it electronically or FaceTime?
Michael, it's really interesting that you ask that. Here's the thing. We schedule the meetings at 8:30.
Mm-hmm.
They've been ongoing at 8:30 just because that's the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
Are you telling me that on Tuesdays, if we were scheduling that meeting later?
At 9.
Okay.
Give me 9 o'clock. Then I know for sure I could be in my space, ready to go.
Okay.
And rocking with it.
Okay. And if I were to send an agenda ahead of time,
please.
It would give you time to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'd be able to benefit from your skills, your intellect,
mm-hmm.
your knowledge of being able to craft just the right opportunities for us.
Yes.
So this is as simple as moving a meeting 30 minutes and
30
sending
minutes.
an agenda ahead of time.
Hello.
Done.
Please. Help.
Let's try that.
Thank
Can
you
we
so
try
much.
that?
Thank you so much.
High five.
High five.
Woo.
So I'd like to be able to take a few moments and give our audience an opportunity to kind of reflect. Positive framing, starting with our mental mindfulness,
Mm-hmm.
our emotional, as I like to call it, emotional maturity,
Yeah.
Focusing on strength-based and context versus all the things that go wrong. Because I have a firm belief what you focus on grows.
Absolutely.
So if you focus on problems, you're going to see more problems.
Yes.
You focus in on what's the positive opposite that you want to create. You have an opportunity to create life between, grow relationships, get beyond. Because I'm a firm believer that in the space of conversation, anything is possible. And I got it. Sometimes we're stuffing people in. We're not. We're just. If we can actually get ourselves mentally present and ready to roll, what would be possible? What would be possible? What would it be for you as you're sitting in this auditorium, sitting at those tables, sitting in those rows? What would be possible for you if you paused for station identification and actually thought to yourself, okay, this is what's going on, or what I'm perceiving is going on. What's the positive opposite? Without being fakey,
Mm-hmm.
with just being able to create a new context, one conversation at a time. I think that could change some conversations.
Yeah.
I think that could change some conversations.
Well, an example, right? We hear complaints, we hear concerns, we hear questions, right? It happens.
Mm-hmm.
We got a situation, oh my God, this project's never going to work, right? We're faced with that.
Mm-hmm.
Using the mindset of, again, positive framing and generative questions, we can take that, this project is never going to work with the way it's designed, and flip it into what changes could we make so it would work.
Brand new possibility. Brand new possibility, brand new flow of team, brand new space. My vision, when I read their material and talked to those ladies, my vision was to see a brand new California where we're loving on each other with one conversation at a time. Of course, appropriately.
Yeah.
But, you know.
Appreciatively in a direction that moves us to positive outcomes and impacts, like what we want to see more of, instead of inviting more problems, more blame, more concerns. We look at how do we solve this and how do we solve it together.
So we wanted to be able to push this out to a question, a one-word answer once again. You know, if you take on this methodology, if you learn this methodology, do you see the possibility of certain changes? You know, if you take on this positive strategy, and for you and your team, what are some of those words? I'm going to pause for a moment and give you guys a chance to respond.
So back to your Q&A box, if you would please, go ahead and text in that one word. What would be different for you?
Yeah, what impacts might you see? What outcomes might you see if you were able to employ positive framing, generative question?
Productive, positive labor relations.
Oh.
Depends on the individual.
Yes.
Absolutely, totally agree.
Supportive, collaboration, enlightenment.
Nice.
Bridging, growing, engaging, efficiency, camaraderie. How about happiness? A little less stress in our lives?
Hallelujah.
Okay. Change. That's powerful. Unity, peace, relax, encouragement, motivating. I like this theme of building bridges.
Yes.
People have mentioned that.
Yes.
Oh, here, this is powerful. Respect.
Oh,
No doubt.
love it.
Transparency. Wow.
Hello.
That's it, right? It's where you're coming from, that impact. You're trying to create the outcomes we're trying to create. We're not trying to figure out who did what. Again, you can't change the past, right? It's how do we move forward? It's that direction. Where do we go from this best?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we're having these conversations in the moment. And then the problem is after we're done with the conversation, we walk away and go, oh, that went good or that went bad.
Right.
You know, if we could just actually work on suspending our ego, as I like to say, let go my ego, you know, if we could suspend that ego just for a moment to be able to go, you know, the conversation was what it was, but I can create something different in the next conversation.
Yes.
What if we shifted? I love it. Thank you so much, folks. Those are exactly what we're working on. That's exactly what we're hoping to get to, is the space where possibilities are revealed. Now, so I want to kind of share some next steps to each and every one of us. First off, I want to be able to make sure, folks, we have a full day long class on Conversations Worth Having.
Yeah, this is a teaser of 45 minutes just to go, what if?
Yeah. And so come on in. We want to be able to work on this. We have 6 hours, 7 hours in the classroom, be able to explore that, be able to extract all kinds of different things. Again, I'm kind of old, but I'm just saying, as each of all those old style conversations, it's going to take some time to shift us from our old style into something very, very positive, very, very generative and appreciative, you know, by being able to do that. So we have a day-long course. The first one is Conversations Worth Having. We're showing your link to be able to enroll into that. We also, for those of you who are leaders, and not only leaders, but people who like to be able to work as consultants and to be able to help facilitate this conversation, we have a follow-on class. You have to have the first class.
That's a prerequisite.
Okay, as a prerequisite to go into the next one, which is strategic conversations. Strategic conversations is based on, of course, the foundation of what we're going to get with Conversations Worth Having, but also off of Jackie's other book, which is called The Thin Book of SOAR. Now, I just want to share, there's a lot of us, and I've spent a lot of years working with SWOT.
Yes, SWOT analyses.
SWOT analysis when we're doing strategic conversations.
And that's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
And threats.
SWOT.
Right. And so Jackie came up with this concept, again, based on appreciative inquiry about strengths, opportunities, aspirations, and results. What do you want to create? And so we've seen major shifts in universities. We've seen major shifts in hospitals based upon Jackie and Sherry's work. And I am looking forward to creating those major shifts throughout the nation, starting here on the West Coast. I love my California.
Yep.
Do you love your California?
Absolutely.
And I just want to see us taking care of each other.
Thriving.
One conversation at a time. So again, it was the leaders or folks who would like to step into that role of leading strategic conversations. That's happening on the 30th of July. Also, we have another one going in November. We also, as a result of this conversation, I always like to finish all my coaching and my training sessions, as well as Christelle, with asking you to take a moment and write 2 or 3 ideas from what you got from this conversation that you can actually employ for yourself. And then I want you to ask yourself, and I want you to write this down, when are you going to put it into work?
Put it on the calendar.
And then last but not least, who will be your accountability partner? And self is not an answer in that area. You've got to have somebody outside of yourself to be able to do that.
Partnerships and collaboration, which helps with everything.
Absolutely. And I love that you put on the slide there for people on that when piece. Put it in on your electronic devices. Put it on your calendar. Make sure it's a date for yourself to get stuff done.
Yes. It's a who does what by when. You, what action items, and what date are you going to have that completed?
Cool. So we got a few more minutes open for some questions. Also want to be able to highlight a few things Jackie sent to me this morning. First off, there's a free conversation toolkit located on her website, her and Sherry's website. It's www.conversationsworthhaving.today. And if you sign in there, you can actually get all kinds of really cool tools. There's a quick 4-pager on conversations is a critical part of everything we do. We also have a getting started with questions. So she gives a whole bunch of ideas on different contexts of questions. And those of you that are parents out there, there is a handout on how to be able to work with your children at breakfast, after school, dinner conversations that can actually create a space where children can flourish and start to pick up these tools now and not wait until they're in their mid-years. Like myself. All right, so any questions out there, folks? We've got about 7 minutes left, and I want to be respectful to your time. And again, I want to thank each and every one of you for sticking around.
Yes, absolutely.
Looks like we had the majority of folks hung in there all the way through, so good job.
One quick question. Someone thinks they have registered for the strategic conversations before the conversations we're having because they're scheduled. And that way, is that going to be a problem?
It will be, because in the strategic conversations, we're making assumptions that you have the basics of positive framing and also generative questions, along with some principles that we'll be teaching you in the foundation piece. So it will be a little bit of a struggle. But love to see you October, November.
Okay, that's helpful. All right, here's another question. So you talked about this a little bit, but can you elaborate on how can you use this for performance management?
Christelle, would you like to take that one?
Yeah.
I think it's great. It's the context, again, what we're talking about, positive framing.
Absolutely. In fact, some of my experiences as a state supervisor, and I know we always say, oh, as a state supervisor, there's things we can't do. Yeah, there actually are things that you can do.
Absolutely.
Performance management to me starts with really being clear for yourself. Where are you coming from? Again, that tone and direction. Think about the outcomes you're trying to create. Think about that positive end result that you would like to see more of.
Mm-hmm.
Shift your mindset into that and start exploring, even before you have this difficult conversation, if that's what the performance management sort of difficult conversation is about. Think for yourself, what would be the most positive, engaging outcome that I could create from this conversation? And how do I flip my mindset from you're doing something wrong, you're not taking responsibility, you're not whatever, into you are taking responsibility, you are following through on commitments, you are behaving effectively, you are engaging with our customers, whatever, right? If my mindset is shifted into they can do this, it is possible, I have seen it.
Mm-hmm.
Focus on the times you have seen that outcome occur, and then start getting curious, right? Remember Curious George. Pause, take a breath, and get curious. What was going on in those situations where they did meet expectations, meet deadlines, engage effectively, respond effectively, whatever it is? And ask about those times. What was going on in those times? Or I ask ahead of time, what motivates you to do your best work? Sometimes that's the conversation, right? If I start to get to know a little more about my team members and understand where they're coming from, what drives them, what engages them, and then I can start tapping into some of that and providing more of that. Again, talking about providing feedback more effectively, being able to communicate more effectively in a way that creates the outcomes we're looking for, the direction moving forward, not trying to throw people back, right? Focusing on the direction of moving forward. How do we get better? How do we grow? How do we develop? How do we get more of what we want? It starts with shifting our own mindset first, and then engaging in those conversations that are generative, really asking for possibilities, options, and then engaging your team members in what part can you play? How do you see this going? What could you do to help us create these outcomes?
Absolutely. And again, what we're talking about is being strength-based. By being able to lead with the strength-based model in that area. I know I had one supervisor a few years back that actually shifted those performance evaluations to be in that space of what we do well.
Yes.
That was great. Go ahead.
Awesome. We have one more question, and that is, I think, going to probably take us to the end here.
Okay.
But if you find yourself in a destructive conversation, what is the first thing that you can do? What's the first tool? I mean, how can you you're in it, you all of a sudden discover you're in this destructive conversation, you've listened into this webinar. What is the first thing you should do to get yourself out of that?
I think the first thing you have to be able to do is identify where are you.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have to be able to identify exactly where you are.
Yep.
Because if you can identify that you're there, you know for fact, oh my gosh, there's some steps, there's some actions that I can do. I don't have to stay in that destructive conversation. I can actually shift out of that. But the first thing I have to do is identify, hey, the tone and the direction both are negative.
Right.
And I don't need to be here. I'm an adult.
Right.
I can actually make my choice to move along, do something else, get into the space that's going to be better for me. Go ahead.
And one conversation I've actually had in the middle of that, when I feel myself, right? Emotional intelligence, that emotional management, the amygdala hijack, right? I take a moment and I go, let's take a break, right? I literally put up my little timeout hands and said, I feel like I'm getting a little heated and that's not where I want to be in this conversation.
Good.
Let's take a break, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, go for a walk, whatever. Let's take a break. Let's come back to this and regroup. I've paused conversations. As a supervisor, I've done it as a team member, talking with my manager and said, I feel like I'm getting a little heated here and I know that's not going to be productive for us. Can we take a break? I step away, I refocus, I reframe, what do we want to get out of this? And I come back to the meeting prepared to have that conversation. It's that shift, that physical shift of let's take a break that gets out of destructive and allows you to regroup and come back.
Suspend our stories too.
That's it.
Exactly.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Michael and Chriselle, for an amazing presentation. Thank you to everyone online, everyone who joined us, fabulous interaction. We really appreciate you engaging with us here today. And just as a reminder, we will be sending you an email with a link to the recording for today's presentation. Thank you so much.
Look forward to seeing you in the class soon.
That's right. Bye, guys. Thank you.